The colder it got, the less likely anyone was to come down that road, and Sergeant First Class Nadia Brennan wanted it that way. She had chosen the house for exactly that reason. A narrow gravel lane off Route 9, barely wide enough for one truck, hidden behind a wall of Douglas fir so thick that even in summer you couldn't see the roof from the county road. In October, when the first hard frost came in off the Cascades and the mud froze overnight into iron ridges, the lane became nearly impassable. She had never once considered this a problem. The dog slept at the foot of the bed. He had since the first night she brought him home 3 years ago, when he'd pressed his 70-pound frame against the back of her knees and refused to move until morning. His name was Kodak. Not her choice, but she had never changed it. He was a Belgian Malinois with one torn ear and a 2-inch scar along his left flank that told a story she already knew by heart, because she had been there when it happened. Nadia didn't talk to people if she could help it. She talked to Kodak. She told him when the coffee was ready. She told him when the wind was picking up, and they'd have to cut the walk short. She told him, in a low voice, about the dream she'd had the night before. The one she always had. The one where Lieutenant Theo Yardley was still alive, and they were back in Kandahar, and the radio was working fine, and nothing had gone wrong. She told Kodak about the dream every time she had it, because saying it out loud was the only thing that kept her from picking up her phone and calling Theo's mother, who lived in Baton Rouge and who did not need a phone call from Nadia at 3 a.m. Kodak listened to all of it. He had never once told her to see someone. He had never once said she needed to process, to heal, to move forward. He just put his chin on her boot and breathed. It was enough. It had to be enough. She had left the army 18 months ago, medical discharge, officially listed as a knee injury sustained during a training exercise at Fort Lewis. That was what the paperwork said. The knee was real. The rest of it, the part they didn't write down, was also real, just inconvenient, and the army had learned a long time ago that inconvenient things were best handled with paperwork. She didn't miss the army. She missed Theo. She missed the version of herself that had existed before Kandahar, the one who had slept through the night and laughed at things easily and hadn't flinched at car backfires. That woman felt like someone she had read about once, not someone she had been. The property had come from her grandmother. 2 acres and a house that was more stubbornness than structure, held together by a good foundation, new insulation she'd put in herself, and sheer refusal to fall down. Nadia had spent the first month repairing fences, the second month splitting firewood, and the third month doing nothing at all except walking the tree line with Kodak and relearning how to exist without a mission. She grew a garden in the spring. She drove into town on Thursdays for groceries and came home before noon. She nodded at the clerk at the hardware store and the woman at the post office and did not invite further conversation. People in small towns recognized the type. They had stopped asking after the first few months. The only person who called her regularly was her sister Patrice, who lived in Portland with her husband and 2 kids, and who called every Sunday at 6, and Nadia picked up every Sunday at 6, because not picking up would mean Patrice would drive up, and Nadia couldn't handle that. "You sound the same," Patrice said one Sunday in November. "I am the same. That's what I mean." Nadia watched Kodak chase a squirrel to the base of a cedar and sit looking up at it with total professional patience, as though he simply needed more information before deciding on his next move. "I'm fine," Nadia said. "You haven't seen anyone since you got out. You haven't gone anywhere. I went to Costco. Nadia, I have everything I need here." That was true, mostly. She had wood heat and a good truck, and a freezer full of venison from the buck she'd taken in September. She had her tools and her books, and the garden beds she was already planning for spring. She had Kodak, who needed a walk every morning and a job every afternoon, and who still, on the bad nights, pressed himself against the back of her knees and breathed steadily until her pulse slowed. She didn't need anything else. She was almost certain of that. The morning it changed started like every other one. She was up before first light, coffee on, Kodak watching her with focused attention from his spot by the door, waiting. She pulled on her boots at the bottom of the stairs, the left one first, always, and grabbed his leash from the hook, though she rarely used it out here. He stayed close. He always stayed close, sighed. The air was bitter, the ground still frozen from the night before. She could see her breath. Kodak immediately put his nose to the ground and began the systematic survey of the property that he conducted each morning, gathering information, updating his files. She walked behind him with her hands in her pockets and her eyes on the tree line. The trail she'd worn into the back acreage looped out through the firs, past the creek and back around to the woodpile. 20 minutes round trip. She'd done it so many times she could have walked it blindfolded, and some mornings it felt like she nearly was. The kind of walking you did on autopilot while your head was somewhere else entirely. This morning, her head was in Kandahar. She'd had the dream again. Theo with his radio, crouching behind the stone wall, turning to look at her with that expression he got when he was working through a problem, focused, almost amused, like whatever was happening was just another puzzle. She had been 10 feet behind him. She had been watching him, and then the world had come apart at the seams, and when it went back together again, he wasn't in it. She had missed the sign. She always came back to that. She had been trained to read terrain, to anticipate, to see the thing before it happened, and she had missed it. He had died 10 feet in front of her, and she had missed the sign that might have changed it. And there was no undoing that, no paperwork that could file it away, no amount of walks in the frozen dark that could make it a different story. Kodak stopped. He was 15 feet ahead of her on the trail, and he had gone absolutely rigid, all 4 legs planted, head low, ears forward. She knew that posture. She'd spent 4 years watching him read situations she couldn't see yet. She stopped too. Kodak. He didn't look back at her. His gaze was locked on something in the underbrush to the left of the trail, and then she heard it, a low, uneven sound, something between a whimper and a breath, and it was human. She moved forward, hand going automatically to where a sidearm would have been, closing on empty air. She made herself breathe. She came up beside Kodak and looked where he was looking. There was a girl in the underbrush. Not a girl exactly. Maybe 19 or 20, slight, dark-haired, sitting with her back against a cedar root with her left arm pressed against her midsection and her face the color of old chalk. She was wearing a canvas jacket too thin for the temperature and jeans that were soaked through at the knee. She was conscious. Barely. "Hey!" Nadia crouched down. "Hey, look at me." The girl's eyes found her slowly, like she was pulling them up from somewhere deep. "I crashed," she said. Her voice was barely there. "The road. I went off my car." She stopped. Her jaw was clenched with the effort of holding herself together. "Are you hurt?" Nadia was already scanning, hands, face, the way she was holding her arm. "Where does it hurt? My side." She exhaled shakily. "And my head. I think I hit, I don't know. I tried to walk, but I couldn't." She looked down at Kodak, who was standing 6 inches from her knee, very still, watching her with calm, unblinking attention. Something in her face shifted, not quite calm, but something adjacent to it. Is that a military dog?" "He was," Nadia said. "Don't move. I'm going to check your head." There was a cut above her left ear, matted with blood already going dark. Nadia put 2 fingers to her wrist and counted. Pulse was there, a little rapid, unsteady, but present. She looked at the girl's pupils. Uneven. "Not good. What's your name?" "Iris." The girl blinked. "Iris. Wait. No." She pressed her free hand against her forehead like she was trying to hold something in place. "Price. Iris Price." "Okay, Iris Price. I'm Nadia. My house is about a 1/4 mile back. Can you try to stand if I help you?" "I don't know that's the right answer," Nadia said. "Let's find out." It took them the better part of 20 minutes to get back to the house. Kodak walked at Iris's left side the entire way, close enough that she could put her hand on his back when she needed something solid to lean against, which she did 3 times. He didn't pull away from her. He walked at her pace, which was slow and uneven, and when she stopped to catch her breath against a tree, he stopped and waited. Nadia had her arm around the girl's waist, taking as much weight as she could. She was running assessment in her head the whole time. Head injury, possible cracked rib from the way she was guarding her side, hypothermia building at the edges. Probable shock. She'd done field medicine in conditions worse than this. She could work with what she had. Inside, she got Iris onto the couch with a blanket and went for her kit. Not a standard first aid kit, nothing so modest. It was a trauma bag, properly stocked, which had raised exactly one eyebrow at the hardware store when she'd ordered the refills, and she had not felt compelled to explain. "Tell me what you remember," Nadia said, working. "Before you went off the road, I was coming from Redmond. My grandmother lives up here. I was." Iris winced as Nadia cleaned the cut. "I was trying to find the turn and I didn't see the ice. What's your grandmother's name?" "Holloway, June Holloway." She paused. "She was. She died in September. I came to get some of her things. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't. Don't apologize. Keep talking. What time did you leave Redmond?" 5 this morning. I wanted to get here before it got dark." Nadia checked her watch. It was 7:42. "Okay, you've been out there at least an hour, maybe more." She sat back. "The cut is manageable. I'm worried about your head. The pupils aren't matching." Iris looked at her. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm going to call for a transport, and you're going to the ER." She said it the way she said most things, not unkindly, but without room for argument, the way you talked to someone when the situation had already decided, and you were just catching them up. Iris shook her head slightly, then stopped because it clearly hurt. "I don't want to be any trouble. You're already trouble. That ship sailed in the woods." Nadia reached for her phone. "I'm not asking. I'm telling you what's happening." The helicopter took 53 minutes. Nadia knew because she timed it, out of habit, out of the part of her that still thought in mission terms, tracking variables. She kept Iris awake, kept her talking, kept a hand on her wrist to monitor the pulse and a close eye on those uneven pupils. Kodak stayed on the floor beside the couch. He had not moved from that position since they'd come inside. Iris's hand had found his back at some point and stayed there, fingers curled lightly in his fur. "Does he always do this?" Iris asked. "Do what? Just stay, like that?" She stroked his ear absently, like he decided I was his job. Nadia watched Kodak for a moment. He was looking at Iris with the kind of attention he usually reserved for the perimeter. "Yeah," she said, "that's what he does. He was deployed 2 tours, Kandahar, then Helmand." Iris was quiet for a moment. "Were you?" Nadia didn't answer right away. She was watching the window, listening for the sound of the helicopter. "Yes," she said finally. "Together." Iris looked down at Kodak, then back up at Nadia. "You got out together too." It wasn't quite a question. Nadia didn't correct her. The medics who came off the helicopter were professional and quick. They had Iris stabilized and on the stretcher in under 6 minutes. The lead medic, a broad-shouldered man named Gareth, with a Montana accent and calm hands, glanced at Nadia's field dressing on the head wound and raised both eyebrows. "Whoever did this knows what they're doing," he said. "She did," Iris said from the stretcher. Her voice was stronger now, the warmth and the glucose drink doing their work. She was looking at Nadia with an expression Nadia couldn't quite categorize. Her and the dog. Gareth looked at Kodak, who was sitting 6 feet from the stretcher, watching the proceedings with professional skepticism. "That a Malinois?" "Belgian, yes. Former MWD." "Yes." He nodded slowly, the way people nodded when something made sense to them that hadn't before. He glanced at Nadia, at her bearing, her hands, the way she was standing, and didn't ask anything else. They lifted the stretcher. Iris turned her head to keep Nadia in her line of sight. "The hospital in Wenatchee?" Nadia said to Gareth. "That's right." She looked at Iris. "I'll come by this afternoon. Make sure you got there in one piece. You don't have to do that." "I know," Nadia said. "I'll be there by 2. She didn't know why she said it. She said it anyway. She stood in the cold and watched the helicopter until it was gone, and then she stood there a little longer, Kodak pressing his flank against her leg. The sky was getting lighter, pale grey going to white, the kind of flat winter light that made everything look two-dimensional. She should go back inside. She had firewood to bring in. She had things to do. She didn't move for another minute. She was thinking about something Iris had said, like he decided I was his job, and the way Kodak had looked on the walk back, steady and purposeful, doing what he'd been trained to do. She was thinking about how the training didn't really go anywhere, for either of them. It just redirected, or didn't. It sat in you, all that capability, and waited for something to need it. She'd thought of her discipline as a wall. It occurred to her for the first time that it might also be a door. She went inside, poured the last of the coffee, sat at the kitchen table with Kodak at her feet. "Don't say anything," she told him. He didn't. She was at the hospital in Wenatchee by 1:30. The woman at the front desk gave her a look when she asked for Iris Price. The look people gave when you showed up at a hospital for someone who wasn't family, wasn't technically your responsibility, who you'd known for about 2 hours in total. Are you a relative? No. A friend? Nadia thought about it. I found her. The woman considered this, then picked up the phone. They put her in a waiting area with plastic chairs and a television showing a weather forecast. She sat with her jacket still on and her hands folded and did not watch the television. Kodak was in the truck. She'd left the windows cracked and the heat running, and she knew he would be fine, and she still found herself calculating exactly how long this would take. 38 minutes later, a woman in scrubs appeared at the waiting room door. She was somewhere in her 40s, with cropped grey-streaked hair and the kind of carriage that came from years of standing on linoleum for 12 hours at a stretch. She looked at Nadia with direct, assessing eyes. "You're the one who found Iris Price?" "Yes. Dr. Colleen Frey," the woman said. "She's asking for you." She studied Nadia for a moment. "You did good work in the field. The way you dressed that wound probably kept her from losing significantly more blood before we got to her." "I had training," Nadia said. "I know." Dr. Frey's voice was even. "Come on." The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that hospitals made. Not silence exactly, but a held breath quality, things happening just outside the frame. Iris was in the bed with a bandage along her hairline and an IV in her arm and color back in her face that hadn't been there this morning in the woods. She turned her head when Nadia came in. "You actually came," Iris said. "I said I would. People say a lot of things." But she was smiling. A little. She looked younger than she had in the woods, with the fear gone and the shock metabolized. "They're saying I've got a mild concussion and 2 cracked ribs, and I need to stay for observation tonight." She shifted slightly and winced. "Which is fine. I don't really have anywhere to be." Nadia sat in the chair beside the bed. "The house in June Hollow. Your grandmother's place. You came alone. My mum couldn't get away from work. She was going to come next weekend, but I thought I'd go ahead and start sorting things." She looked at her hands on the blanket. "My grandmother she was the one who really got me. You know how there's one person in your family who you feel like understands what you're about? She was that person." Nadia thought of her own grandmother, the one who'd left her the property. The one who'd said, when Nadia had come back from her first deployment and couldn't sleep and couldn't sit still, "Go find something to fix." She'd meant it literally. She'd handed her a toolbox. "Yeah," Nadia said, "I know." Iris was looking at her carefully. "Can I ask you something?" Nadia tilted her head. "The dog. Kodak." She said the name like she'd been turning it over. "He was your dog over there? In Kandahar?" "He was assigned to our unit. His handler was Lieutenant Theo Yardley." The name was out before she'd decided to say it. She heard herself say it and did not take it back. "Theo was killed in our second deployment, Kandahar, 2022. Iris was very still. "Kodak was reassigned to me after that," Nadia said. "I'd been his secondary handler. After Theo, I was all he knew." She stopped. "When I got out, I put in for him. It took 7 months of paperwork, but I got him. And you went up to the mountains, Iris said quietly. And I went up to the mountains. Together. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Outside the room, the hospital went about its business. Someone's shoes on linoleum, a cart being wheeled, a voice over an intercom too distant to make out. I'm sorry about Theo, Iris said. Nadia nodded. Were you? Were you close? It was the kind of question that could mean several things. Nadia chose the truest answer. He was my person, the way your grandmother was yours. She said it simply, without apology or embellishment. Not like that. Like, there are people you serve with and people you fight beside, and then there are people where it's something else. Something that doesn't have a word for it. He was that. Iris's eyes were bright. And you blame yourself. Not a question. Nadia looked at her. I can hear it, Iris said, in how you say his name, like it costs something. She held Nadia's gaze, steady, unafraid. I'm a social work student, which means I've been trained to hear that particular thing in how people talk about people they've lost. She paused. Sorry. Is that too much? It's accurate, Nadia said, which was the most she'd said about it to another human being in 18 months. Iris nodded. My grandmother always said that guilt was just love that didn't know where to go yet. Nadia sat with that for a moment. It was the kind of thing that could have sounded like a greeting card, but didn't, coming from Iris, at this particular moment in this particular hospital room. It sounded like something someone had actually learned. She sounds like she was smart, Nadia said. She was the smartest person I've ever known. Iris looked at her hands again. She lost her husband in Vietnam, my grandfather. She never really talked about it, but sometimes she said the ones who came back carried the ones who didn't, like it was an actual weight. She didn't mean it as a sad thing. She meant it like, the carrying is how you keep them. Nadia thought about Theo. She thought about the dream, the one she had 3 or 4 nights a week, the one where the radio was working and nothing had gone wrong. She thought about Kodak pressing his chin against her boot in the dark. I've been trying to put it down, she said. It came out quiet, less certain than anything else she'd said. The weight. I thought that was what getting better looked like. Putting it down. Maybe it's not about putting it down, Iris said. Maybe it's about figuring out where to carry it so it doesn't break you. Nadia didn't answer. She was looking at the window, at the flat white winter sky. She thought about what Kodak had done that morning. The moment he'd stopped on the trail, locked onto something she hadn't seen yet, and held his ground. She thought about how that was what he'd always done. Not the absence of the mission, the continuation of it. She thought about the way Dr. Frey had looked at her when she'd said I had training, the way she'd said I know and left it at that, just 2 words, the whole story in them. My grandmother's house is going to need help, Iris said suddenly. It's been empty since September. I'm going to be here until tomorrow at least, and then I'll need to go back to Portland and I don't even know the state of it. Pipes could have frozen. She had this whole back room full of. I don't even know what's in it. Nadia looked at her. Why are you telling me this? Because you seem like someone who's good at fixing things. Iris's mouth curved slightly. And because I think maybe you've been up on that mountain long enough that you've forgotten some things are different down here. Such as that sometimes people end up in each other's roads. She glanced at the bandage along her hairline. Literally, in this case. She looked back at Nadia. I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just saying, if you wanted to come look at the house with me when I get out tomorrow, I wouldn't say no. Nadia thought of 100 reasons not to. The firewood that still needed bringing in. The garden beds she was planning. The lane that kept the world out and herself in. The lane that froze over in October and made everything easier. She thought of Kodak on the trail this morning, locked onto something she hadn't seen yet, already moving before she'd given the signal. I'll come, she said. Iris nodded, unhurried, like she'd expected either answer and was okay with both. That steadiness was something. Nadia noticed it now, the way the girl held herself, even banged up and bed-bound, the same quality Nadia had spent years trying to build in recruits. You couldn't teach it, not really. Either you had it or you didn't. "Get some sleep," Nadia said, standing. "You're still running on adrenaline and you don't know it yet." "I know it," Iris said. "It's the social work training. You learn to read your own system. That's useful. It is. I'm going to be terrible at small talk for about 6 more hours, and then I'm going to crash." She looked at Nadia. "Thank you for this morning, and for coming. A beat, and for telling me about Theo." Nadia put on her jacket. "Get some sleep." "You said that already. It still applies." She was halfway to the door when Iris said, "What's he doing right now?" "Kodak." Nadia stopped. "Sitting in my truck, watching the parking lot. Does he know where you are?" She thought about it. "He always knows where I am." "Good," Iris said. "That's good." Outside, the afternoon had gone colder, the white sky pressing down. She walked to the truck and opened the door, and Kodak was exactly where she'd known he'd be. Front seat, watching the entrance of the hospital with those calm, focused eyes, tracking everything. He looked at her when she got in. "I know," she said. "Don't." He put his chin on her knee. She sat there for a minute in the parking lot, engine running, her hand on his head. She wasn't thinking about the firewood or the garden beds. She was thinking about what Iris had said. The carrying is how you keep them, and about Theo turning to look at her over his shoulder with that almost amused expression, working through the problem. She had been 10 feet behind him. She had been watching him, and she had kept watching him every night since, in the only way she had left. Maybe that wasn't a failure. Maybe that was something else. She put the truck in reverse and pulled out of the parking lot. The lane back up to the house would be icy by now, the shadow of the firs making it worse. She'd take it slow. She'd brought the chains just in case. She didn't take the turnoff toward home. She took the road east, toward June Hollow, where a woman named June Price had lived alone for years after losing the person she'd loved in a war, and had apparently found a way to carry it that didn't break her, and had passed that knowledge on to a granddaughter who had ended up, somehow, in the right woods at the right moment. Nadia didn't believe in things like that. Signs meaning the universe arranging itself around a lesson. She believed in training. She believed in terrain. She believed in the moment when the dog stopped on the trail and held his ground, because something out there needed finding. She drove east. The sky was low and white, and the road was straight, and Kodak rode shotgun with his nose slightly cracked toward the window, reading everything the air had to say. She let him. She watched the road. They were already moving.